Good day and welcome once again to the Information Command Center here at the studios of the Government Information Service. I am your host, Tony Nicholas, and you tune in to the afternoon report. We're live on NTN as well as on the Government of Saint Lucia Facebook page and YouTube. We also say a very special thank you to WVNT 93.5 FM for their continued partnership with us at the Information Command Center. To bring you up to date with what's been happening, earlier today we had an update from the Acting Commissioner of Police, Milton Daisy, on persons breaking the curfew. As we know, we are still under a state of emergency, and the police have so far arrested 6 individuals as of last week, including 2 police officers who reportedly turned themselves in following a viral video incident where the police attempted to break a group who had gathered at Union on May 6. And those arrests were made in violation of the curfew order. Saint Lucia is also under water emergency, and certain practices are prohibited, and as such, the police will be enforcing any breaches. Saint Lucia has declared this water-related emergency effective today, Monday, May the 18th. The water-related emergency will remain in effect until further notice. This order prohibits the use of water from the pipes of the Water and Sewerage Company for a number of purposes. They include the washing of vehicles using a hose, watering a lawn, hedge, garden, farm, ground, and recreational field, as well as pressure washing a house using a hose or watering a roadway, pavement, garage, or path. Using water from pipes of Wasco for concrete mixing and block making is also prohibited. The filling of swimming pools or filling a leak or overflowing storage tank are also prohibited, along with an activity that may require the use of a considerable or excessive quantity of water. A person who contravenes subsection 1 of the order commits an offense. Such an individual is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $3,000 or a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or both, and to a further fine not exceeding $50 for each day during which the contravention continues. So folks, we are being reminded that to use water sparingly, and given that we are experiencing a severe drought, there will be water rationing in many areas across Saint Lucia. Today, we also review the consultation and strategic plan held on Friday, May 15th. This plan is to reopen our economy and country in phases after weeks of a partial shutdown due to COVID-19. As of June 4th, 2020, Saint Lucia is expected to begin to gradually open its borders to regional and international travel. Both the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmar-George, and Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasney have assured that as we open our borders in the coming weeks, we will be increasing the protocols for anyone who intends to visit our island. This would include all travelers having to undergo a COVID-19 test before departing the country for Saint Lucia. The use of respiratory masks will also be mandatory, and undergoing frequent temperature checks. Minimal physical contact with other persons, consistent sanitation and other improved COVID-19 protocols at ports of entry, hotels, in taxis, and all other establishments. One of the individuals who presented at Friday's consultation was Dr. Sharon Gardner-Hippolyte on the phased approach being taken. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
This is to give you an idea of our cases over the weeks, and you will see our curve. We are now in May with 0 cases coming out every day from our testing. The orange line gives an indication of our...
So now we're going to take you into our proposed reopening schedule. And you probably are asking yourselves, how did we come up with this? So a model was created that essentially scored and weighed all of our services across all the sectors. There were 5 areas that were scored. You got a health score, an economic score, a social score, a risk score, and also a protocol difficulty score. So every single sector, every single service was given a rating in relation to those scores. And what I'm about to show you is how you ended up with each of the services in each of the phases and how we are proposing to open.
Mass crowd gatherings, which remains a high-risk area for us, there would be limitations in the numbers that are allowed within a closed space, similar to the guidelines that went out for the churches, where the numbers depended on the square footage of the organization at the time. So for mass crowds, there'd be a number of guidelines, first of all, in terms of the ensuring that persons with respiratory signs and symptoms are not allowed into the activity, and also limitations in the numbers coming in for activities that are closed up. So all of those, we will be working with the event sector to ensure it's done with a wide range of stakeholders before those are finalized.
And so we just heard there from Dr. Sharon Gardner-Hippolyte, as well as Dr. Sharon Belmar-George, on the approach being taken by the government as far as the reopening of the country is concerned. And Dr. Hippolyte also placed into context the final phases leading into what many are describing as the new normal. Let's take a listen.
This is to give you an idea of our cases over the weeks, and you'll see our curve. We are now in May with 0 cases coming out every day from our testing. The orange line gives an indication of our testing capacity throughout the months.
As Dr. Belmar indicated, we went from mitigation and we're now moving towards a phase where we are looking at recovery on many levels. We are proposing that our economy and our society basically opens in 5 phases. There's phase 1A and B, 2, 3, 4, and 5. At each phase, we will outline what would be allowed to operate and the level of activity that permitted at each stage. Provide the requirements for businesses. More detail would be provided by the Ministry of Health and Wellness in relation to the protocols and guidelines for each business and the level of activity. These are our phases. The first phase was 1A, and it was essentially looking to slow the spread. Everybody remembers the 1st of April, where primarily our only areas that were allowed to operate were our health and our security and our utilities. We were under a 24-hour curfew, and physical distancing was very much in effect. People were not allowed to leave their homes. School was suspended, tourism was suspended. We then moved to the cycle of 1B. Again, some of our businesses were allowed to operate, but focus was on essential services. Our curfew was reduced to 10 hours, and school and tourism remained suspended. Phase 2, we allowed for minimal operations. We allowed for other services to be able to open and to provide some measure of service to our community, particularly when you had to look at things like our impending drought season. We remained the curfew of 10 hours, and tourism and school were suspended. We now move to phase 3. This is the current phase that we are in right now in Saint Lucia. And we refer to this phase as increased incremental operations. And the reason being is that we are currently in the 3rd cycle of phase 3. We had the first cycle where we allowed some businesses to operate. We allowed for particular components of that sector to be able to operate. And then every week, we gradually allowed for a little bit more. There was a 10-hour curfew, continued to be in effect. We allowed for persons to be able to exercise. There was some relaxation of our religious practices. And at this point, we are making provisions for persons to be able to undergo national examination. In respect of tourism, we allowed for a feeding program and also development of industry licensing. Moving forward into phase 4, we're looking at allowing for our economy internally to be able to operationalize and to be able to have all of our sectors operating. Some of them at different levels, depending on the type of operation that is in effect. Our curfew, we're looking to reduce it. We are hoping to have domestic and travel and international travel resume, and also allowing again for provisions for national examination. With respect to the tourism sector, we are going to be allowing for our airports to open. Now, what I need for everybody to appreciate is those are our goals, those are our aspirations, and we have to work towards a goal and an aspiration. Otherwise, you'll be mindlessly wondering where you are going. Phase 5, finding our new normal. This seems to be the catchphrase of the day. What is going to be our new normal? It certainly is not going to be life as we imagined it prior to COVID, but everybody has to appreciate in every single sector it is going to be radically different. Our international travel can resume, but with very strict protocols. Social, public must accept and adhere to the new norms. Relation to school, again, we are allowing for national examinations, and with respect to tourism, the full recovery and reopening, but again, strict adherence to protocols.
And so with the gradual reopening of the Saint Lucian economy, it is expected that all of the protocols will be adhered to, and business places are urged to visit www.covid19response.lc for the various protocols and guidelines. We also urge all business owners, employees, consumers, Saint Lucians, and visitors to continue following the COVID-19 safety measures and protocols, which will help keep ourselves, our families, and our country safe. Our frontline workers, our police, our firefighters, our first responders, doctors, nurses, they've all been doing a great job, and we must assist them in this fight. And of course, our nurses were celebrated last week as part of International Nurses Day. We're taking a report from the Bureau of Health Education.
A pleasant good day, everyone, and welcome to this short ceremony where we'll be recognizing the nurses. International Nurses Week was held from May 6 to May 12, and today's International Nurses Day, which is May 12. So first of all, we'll have the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ms. Jenny Daniel, who will be giving us a few brief remarks.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness recognizes today as International Nurses Day. In honor of this, we wish to congratulate our nurses in Saint Lucia and to thank them for the great effort that has been placed towards the battle of COVID-19 response in Saint Lucia. We recognize that nursing is a tough job, and we recognize that it's an absolutely necessary job if we are to maintain health and wellness in Saint Lucia. So for this, in this regard, the ministry wishes to thank and congratulate all the nurses here today, both at all of our institutions as well as our primary healthcare centers, and to wish everyone Happy International Nurses Day.
On behalf of management and staff of the Respiratory Hospital and the Owen King European Union Hospital, I would like to thank all our nurses for their hard work. Every day, our nurses put extra effort in administering their duties to ensure that we have health and wellness in St. Lucia. I just want to take this moment to highlight the significant work that is being done by the nurses over at our respiratory hospital. And today, as we honor them, we take this opportunity to serenade them in a very profound way while observing social distancing. We are now combating COVID, and everyone is involved in ensuring that we have zero deaths in Saint Lucia. And today is very momentous for us because at the respiratory hospital so far, we have zero deaths, and it is as a direct result of the hard work of our nurses. And today, on International Nurses Day, we, the management of the Owen King European Union Hospital and the Respiratory Hospital, congratulate and salute our nurses. Thank you. Our hard-working nurses at the OKEUH Hospital, we thank you very much for your hard work. So we are going to salute you this afternoon. And to help us do this, we have with us our two premier saxophonists in Saint Lucia, D. Sax and Mr. Isman Lovens. Put your hands together as we salute our nurses.
I just wanted to tell you that we really love you. We love the work that you do.
Thank you.
And it's just a small gesture to say we appreciate you. Especially now in the COVID system where you have to be right in the face of this adversity. So I'm going to thank you in a little song that I have set up there.
When I look at your faces, I see kind faces, lovely faces, hardworking faces and hardworking nurses. Thank you very much for everything that you've done, always, but especially through this season that we're in right now.
The wind beneath our wings. Certainly that's what our nurses are at this time. And we say thank you to Fennel Neptune for that report there. We take a break now, and when we come back, you'll be joined by our guests here at the studios of the Government Information Service. Stay tuned.
And in the latest news, the coronavirus, or COVID-19, continues to be a health emergency across the world. Caribbean people are concerned.
Everybody know about COVID-19. COVID-19. Keep socially distance and your proper hygiene. Wash your hands then clean. And don't discriminate, cause it might be. It very well could be. Somebody will look like you or look like me. Listening, listening. We're in this together. Yeah. We all got to work with each other. Yeah. Look out for our friends and our neighbor. And if you feel sick, don't be afraid to call the doctor.
Red Cross volunteers from across the Caribbean, working hard to fight discrimination. So if a person should feel ill, then they will contact the authorities without hesitation.
The most vulnerable are the elderly, but the truth is it can infect anybody. So what we need is solidarity. Everyone helping everyone like a family. So
this is a message to the nation. Make sure you seek out the right information from official sources like the Ministry of Health, Red Cross and the World Health Organization.
Everybody know about COVID-19. COVID-19. Keep socially distance and your proper hygiene. Wash your hands then clean. Don't discriminate, cause it might be. It very well could be. Somebody will look like you or look like me. Listening, listening.
People around the world facing this pandemic. Coronavirus have the whole world a panic. Now is not the time to be fearful, but to be careful, supportive and empathetic.
This is the state of the society. Some people full of fear and anxiety. Yo, a lot of fake news in the community. But what we need now is more love and unity. So
this is a message to the nation. Make sure you seek out the right information from official sources like the Ministry of Health, Red Cross and the World Health Organization.
Everybody know about COVID-19. COVID-19. Keep socially distance and your proper hygiene. Wash your hands then clean. Don't discriminate, cause it might be. It very well could be. Somebody will look like you or look like me. Listening, listening. We're in this together. We all got to work with each other. Look out for our friends and our neighbor. And if you feel sick, don't be afraid to call the doctor.
We are indeed in this together. Very timely message there from Red Cross. And join me now in the studios. We have Marva Okilie, Communications Assistant at the Saint Lucia Red Cross, as well as Mr. Hubert Pierre, President of the Saint Lucia Red Cross. And of course, we cannot be discussing pandemic emergencies and what have you without the involvement of Red Cross. Welcome and good to see both of you.
Thank you, Tony.
Even though Marva is every 10 years. I think the last time I saw Marva was down in Fort Saint-Jacques after Hurricane Thomas. That was the last time we encountered.
That's a good thing, because it would mean 10 years ago we were in a situation where persons' lives were threatened.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing?
Yes, it's a
Well, I'd like to think that, you could be seen a little more often, that we don't always have to meet under dire circumstances.
That's true.
So hopefully going forward that's going to change, right?
Yes, I'll do my best.
Okay, so welcome, Marva. Maybe you guys could start by telling us, for those who do not know, although I'm expecting everyone to know what the Saint Lucia Red Cross is all about, but just tell us a little background about the Saint Lucia Red Cross and what the Red Cross is all about.
Well, let me first of all say thank you for being invited to this forum. Marva just said 210 was the last, and now we're in 220. That therefore means we're due one. Mm-hmm. That's the bad news. The other thing is, in 210, Saint Lucia had a severe drought. I had just coming out of Haiti, and I walked straight into Thomas. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be very watchful. Having said this, Saint Lucia Red Cross celebrated 70 years just last year. We have been here from 1949, and we are well known. Our brand is of course universal, and we seek to respect that. We have 7 principles that our actions are being governed by, and we do all we can do as an auxiliary body to the government of the day, or the public services. So when things like COVID do happen, we find ourselves more than busy, in that we have to be part of the response. A few years ago, we had H1N1, and at that time we sat together and decided, hey, you know what? If there is another pandemic, we should be thoroughly prepared. And of course, Saint Lucia has one of the most comprehensive response plans within the OECS, if not the Caribbean. And the Saint Lucia Red Cross is part and parcel of this, and we would, of course, play our role. Disaster preparedness and response, one would say, is our heartbeat. But beyond this, we go through youth, and we have a number of programs, health. And let me quickly say that, as you have mentioned, this matter of no water, the Saint Lucia Red Cross has begun its preparation, because we are thinking of water, sanitation, and health. Mm-hmm. The same way, once we heard COVID and there was the threat, we developed the scenarios, 4 of them. 1, if this should impact the island. Secondly, if it becomes community spread, the result from this, people would have to be locked down, and people would lose their jobs. So psychological support, and then we would have to look for subsistence feeding.
Support for livelihoods.
Yes, support for livelihoods, that would have been, and all of that, we already have that on the table, and we are moving forward with this. So we are there, we are working very hard, and we are trying to bring a level of relief to St. Lucians.
Give us some more specifics thus far as to what some of your interventions have been given the response to COVID-19.
Well, one of them, I think one of the things we should really understand is the fact that risk communication and community engagement has been one of our main pillars, in that people need to understand what the virus is, how it affects the body. People also needed to understand modes of transmission. So there was the point of risk communication, but we also need to understand that because your environment or your communities are the persons who you would need to also be able to respond to the situation. They are the ones who may be at risk, but they are the ones who also have to put in place the things that they would need to minimize their risk. So there must be community engagement. And so risk communication for us included some of these materials which we have in front of us, leaflets, which spoke to how do I protect myself, how do I protect my family. There are elements where we looked at planning in terms of your disaster plan, family disaster plans, because you need to be able to, if your family were to be in a lockdown or in a quarantine zone, how do you access food? How, if you need to take a child to a doctor and you can't go because you don't have transportation, who is the person you're going to call on? So these are the areas that we try to disseminate information to our communities, but also always with the fact that they need to understand that there is an element of risk for everybody, and that no one person is safe from COVID unless everybody is safe.
In terms of the paraphernalia that I see there before you, what are your target groups?
There were different target groups. For example, these here focus most especially on our psychosocial support for families, and that's why the caption is, how do you feel lately? An opportunity for persons to search inside and really get in touch with your feelings. It doesn't make sense to mask it. It doesn't make sense to pretend it doesn't exist. So these little comic graphics, and next to each one there's a term that they can use to identify with. So am I tired? Do I feel tired? Do I feel afraid? Do I feel exhausted? And in the beginning, there were a lot of persons who could identify with the fact that the level of stress of not knowing what would happen, but also seeing what was going on around, and just the idea that there's a possibility that my entire family may be infected. There's a possibility that people around me may die. There's a possibility I may lose my job. There's a possibility I may... So all of these things, these stressors, may have exacerbated already existing situations in some families, or they may have caused some families. So these were the beginning as to how do you feel lately. Prior to that was the education. These were general education, which we distributed at the community level for community fairs. And this was, I want to stress that this was before Saint Lucia had experienced any cases. So there was that step ahead. Let people know what we know at the time of coronavirus. You would expect, or you would understand that as persons became to understand a little more of the virus, some information that existed before have changed in terms of how you protect yourself, in terms of how the virus was transmitted, in terms of the signs and symptoms. So these were very basic information as to what was factual at the time. But as time went on, some of the information has changed and evolved. We have now moved to look at children because we recognize there's a gap for child-friendly information, and that's where these came in, the coloring books. So there's opportunity for the children to learn about the COVID virus using Paula and Albert, who are doctors, and they speak to what the virus is. It's important for us to understand, they look at what the virus is, they look at the signs and symptoms, and they look at prevention. And all of this is an opportunity for children to learn. The coloring is an opportunity. Coloring has an effect on your mood. If you're nervous, if you're stressed and you color, it helps to ease that mood. And so these also is an opportunity to deal with the psychosocial impact of the virus on the children. And we're also hoping that from a family standpoint, it will allow opportunity for families to learn and to share information or discuss COVID in their family settings.
Given that we have several protocols that we need to observe, Mr. Pierre, what channels have you been utilizing in terms of your community outreach? Because in the past, we all know Red Cross have been very hands-on, being out there and having the presence in the communities. How difficult, how challenging has that been for you?
Well, you see, when we do disaster management, we begin with preparedness before we get to response and recovery. Preparedness would dictate that within the communities, you have what is called a community disaster response team and or a Red Cross branch. They would do most of the assessments, and they would have known persons who have been impacted. So for example, once the Prime Minister pulled the trigger and said Nemo will, we as Red Cross, we know our commitment. When we have problems like these, we are supposed to feed for the first 72 hours. So that was a trigger, being an agency with NEMO, because as you would well appreciate, what is that BZ is just the secretariat, but it's the agencies that function. So what we did then was make the decision, one, we cannot go out in droves for distribution. We therefore would ensure that the goods get to the community where we have our groups. Secondly, we are always concerned about doing things in a dignified way. So it would be that when we're going, the persons who locally, and they know where they're going, there's no TT lane or forming lines or anything, they go to the house, you make the call for about 6 or 8 feet, you explain why you're here, and you put this there, they move back, and you put this stuff at the doorstep or something like that. And to prevent duplication, we placed a little red cross at the foot of the home, so that anybody else wanting to do anything would see that the Red Cross had been here. Because this is one of the challenges we have had over the years, where persons, the stronger ones and the deceitful ones would come forward twice, 3 times, and then the poor little old lady who cannot move would stay there unattended. So our focus was really those persons we knew prior to COVID-19 had serious needs already. And once the country was locked down, they would not be able to find something to do. It was virtually impossible. So, having said this, we covered Mark, Bexar, Dennery, Jackmill, Ancillary, Millet, and a number of persons within the Castries Basin. Oleon also, and I can't remember all off my head now, but we really went to work, and we did in excess of 1,000 families. And beyond this, we did certain institutions, and Cornerstone, which is next to us. We supported the effort on the court that, these street people that they're housing there now. We also reached out to OKU and a number of others. We did quite a lot, saliently, silently, but efficiently. And that is what the Red Cross does.
What did some of those provisions include that you distributed? Okay,
there would be, it was divided really in two parts. And the government did what the government gave us.
The supplies.
Supplies to be distributed. And there was some of the hygiene stuff. And based on this fair standard on the humanitarian charter, we had to ensure that the food basket did apply. And the hygiene was separated from the food, the hygiene kits. So that we did based on that, and I think we gave all the basic foodstuffs, given the kind of nutrients that one would need. You'd go from carbohydrates to proteins to whatever, but it was complete, and it was for 1 month.
From here on out, what are some of the other interventions we are likely to see the Red Cross getting involved in? Because it appears that we're in this for a while longer.
One, we are continuing our food distribution. Secondly, we have already applied for a grant where we can livelihood support, especially for persons who have lost their jobs. We try to give them a certain amount of funding. And we'll issue the ATM cards and so. The criterion is there, the priority is also before us, but this is our focus. We have already started looking at the hurricane season long before now. We are prepared to supply hygiene stuff for 1,000 families. It is a principle of disaster workers that we don't encourage storing food. When you speak about food, I hear people talk about perishable and non-perishable. But you cannot lose the fact that there is perishable and what you call non-perishable, you also have shelf life. And it's a waste of time and money to stockpile food for an impact that never happened this year, but would happen 2 years down the line. So what we do, we sign memorandum of understanding with business places, and their warehouse become our virtual warehouse. So when something happens, we already had agreement. You'll supply us with A, B, C, D, E, F, and that is the wise way to go. This is what we do in this thing. And having been in it for 30 plus years and been issued a World Cup, it is something I've gone through the region, the Americas. And I've worked in many islands for this disaster response, also for that of educating persons in the line of disaster preparedness, etc. And in fact, the whole gambit of what we call disaster management. So quite a lot has been done by the Red Cross, through the Red Cross, with the Red Cross, and with other partners. And we are still partnering with people. And some of them have already reached out to us to support us financially and otherwise. And we are going to do something that we have never done before, because now we are going to look at a 4-tier response. More than the cash, more than the food, we are concerned about the weather, the drought that we are faced with. Water and sanitation, we do have a machine down there where we could go and take it anywhere to get whatever the state of the water, we can make it wholesome, treat it and wholesome.
Okay. What's the capacity of?
10,000 gallons a day.
Okay.
A day, yes.
So what we are looking for. We are looking for a source, and we have to do that with WASCO. And of course, those who are in charge of water conservation, etc., to find the correct place to do this. That water will never be paid for. But the fact remains, trucking the water has always been very, very, very costly. Very costly. We may get a gallon for about 5 cents, but we may transfer this 1,000 or whatever gallon for something like $50,000 because we don't have a truck. But nonetheless, we'll do all that we can. The last storm that we had, the last hurricane, the last impact, I remember we did ask a captain all the way from Liverpool to have enough water on the boat to create buoyancy and etc. And that water would be given to us in Saint Lucia. It came all the way from England. And you exchange the water for the cargo that you're about to take.
Okay.
So we have different ways of looking at matters and how to handle it. And we work, and we continue to work, and we will work because our business is to save lives in this country.
Martha, I would assume that a number of your training programs that you're engaged in, even that you had to retool some of your training exercises. How is that coming along? Because I know the Red Cross is also constantly engaged in training.
It's interesting that you should bring this up because one of the backbones in the community is our community disaster response team. And COVID has caused a revision of even the training methodology that only today there was a webinar in advance of the hurricane season. There was a webinar as to how we can encourage our community disaster response teams to use e-services and e-mobiles and e-technologies so that they can accomplish the task or the roles that they have been set to do, because you would appreciate there's no face-to-face. It's very limited. But it's going to be a challenge because we are a community, or we are an organization that have always showed a face. There's a face to the Red Cross. It's a community person. It's probably some cases Mr. Pierce. I'm sure Mr. Pierce has known somebody's in this Red Cross. So there's always a face with the Red Cross. But now our training has to happen online, or our training has to happen in a setting where the distance between you and the next person is free at the minimum to 6 feet. So it has caused a change in the methodology, but it has also caused a change in the way the information is reaching the communities. Yes.
Most certainly, the interface of the Red Cross, being a humanitarian agency, persons want to see the person.
The person, yes.
But it's the new normal, as some folks would say. We take another break now, and as we go to a break, we're taking a message from the Committee of Red Cross International.
SCRC.
Do we have that?
In an effort to ensure patient and first responder safety, the Saint Lucia Fire Service has reviewed its patient transfer procedures, especially for patients with respiratory distress. Face masks will be provided. At no time during transportation should the face mask be removed. Please be patient and cooperative during this time to ensure you receive the best possible care while keeping our first responders safe.
It's easy to become afraid during a disease outbreak, especially a pandemic. How can I catch it? Who already has it? How do I stay safe? How can I keep my family safe?
Uncertainty can lead us to reject or to be afraid of people affected by COVID-19. It's normal that we feel worried. But sticking with the facts on how to prevent COVID-19 from spreading and what to do if you encounter symptoms is our best defense. Rejecting or fearing people can cause them to hide their symptoms. It discourages people from practicing preventive behaviors like wearing masks and physical distancing. It can even stop people from seeking health care.
Ultimately, This means the disease is harder to diagnose, treat, and contain. So how can we overcome fear and stigma to help the fight against COVID-19? Words matter. Talk to and about people affected by the virus with respect. Spread the facts. Practice and share the recommendations endorsed by your health authorities. Be kind and look after each other. Check in on your family, friends, and neighbors. Offer support where you can. Have you seen social stigma happening in your community? How did you respond? Tell us in the comments below.
And welcome back. We just saw a message there from the Red Cross dealing with stigma, one of the negative downsides, one of the many negative downsides of COVID-19. We are here in studio with the president of the Saint Lucia Red Cross, Mr. Hubert Pierre, as well as Marva Okilia, who's responsible for communications. Before we went to the break, well, during the break, we were just talking a little about shelter, Mr. Pierre. Just give us a little update on that as far as the Red Cross is concerned.
The Saint Lucia Red Cross is extremely concerned about shelter in the light of COVID-19. We already know the buildings that we have, we qualified by terms of emergency shelter. Saint Lucia Red Cross was the first organization that brought shelter training to this country. And I must say, the question that comes to mind is if we have an impact when persons need shelter, what do we do? Do we allow them to go to the same schools and decide the school as a quarantine area? What shall we do then? The fact remains that ever since February, Saint Lucia Red Cross and UNHCR and a number of other players sat down and they made decisions. And we do have these decisions as Red Cross. I have lately shared it with the Secretariat in the NIMO office to see how we can come to grips with this given situation. Additionally, Red Cross possesses what we call a shelter kit. What it does is, for example, if you have been impacted in your homes, you will build something just outside your home, in your own domain, in your own space where you can feel comfortable, so you don't have to cattle into a building and create further problems. So we were thinking about this, but the mindset in the country must be that of accepting that kind of behavior based on what we know. So the education must be there and the knowledge must be shared, letting people know the availability of such actions. And we all should be prepared. We just this year, I don't know. Sometimes the Director General tells me, just don't open your mouth because you know what happens next. So, but we have to be in a real state of readiness this year. We've got to be ready. COVID is already there. Yesterday it started raining, or yesterweek, and the mosquitoes started whispering in my ears already. Dengue is there. Chikungunya hasn't gone. Everything is Zika is still there.
Going back, just touching on what you just said, I mean, I'm just trying to play this out in my mind. When you said about the shelter, we're talking about shelter in terms of disaster preparedness. But you also need to look at the social distancing and the protocols.
Well,
so in the case of an emergency, a hurricane, you need to take that into consideration, that you can't have 100, 200 persons huddled up into one facility.
This is a key factor.
So you're saying that the Red Cross already have protocols or plan laid out where that is concerned?
Since February we have that. I mean, for example, in Saint Lucia, I went to a specific school. People were sheltering there. And I was like, no, that's not the way it's done. And I had to go back to my office and get tarpaulin and partition certain areas to allow families their privacy. Okay? So you cannot think of, this is a school, people are here, let us have a little room here to quarantine whom we think is sick. You don't do that. The stigma and everything else that goes with it. That is why we have to begin to think now, what shall we do then? We don't have to wait then and scramble. And this must be the fourth pattern. That is why we have been thinking so far ahead that you would not believe.
I guess that's where it comes in, Marva. You were talking about the early warnings. You wanted to talk a little more on?
Yes, it's important because if you consider the benefits to early warning, then you could understand how it can reduce the loss that you may experience with the impact of any hazard on your country. And that was one of the objectives behind a project that we have been implementing in the past 6 months in Mark and Ancillary, 2 flood-prone communities where they have developed early warning flood systems. So at the community level, they were able to identify vulnerable areas or spots in their community where they are highest exposure to floods. We mapped these, and then we developed a system where the community can create alerts. So you have persons who monitor staff gauges in the river, and you have persons who monitor rain gauges. So for example, in the community of Mark, there are 2 staff gauges. One is in the Two-Flora area, the other is near the Flosac area. And these staff gauges also have a color code to it, where it's red, orange, and yellow. Each color signifies the severity or the expectation to the said event, which is the flood. Okay. And the community members, through a telephone tree, they WhatsApp the information to those who need to get that information at Hay. For example, at the yellow level, you realize that the rains are coming down heavy, but at the yellow level, on that river bank, you could see that the water rising to that yellow level. You send out that alert that it's at yellow. So those in Crown Lands, for example, would know, hey, the river is coming up, and they take the decision what to do. You go to orange, which is a little higher than the yellow, and the orange would indicate to you that there is a definite possibility that it's going to flood. When you get a red alert, you know it's happening already. Like the people in the community themselves would say, "Love Yekade son." So we use their common language, we use their knowledge, and we develop these early warning systems. And if you go into the communities now, you'll notice there are billboards with these same messages which the community spoke to as to what they do or what they know of their river. And each household in the community also receive flood magnets with those flood messages so that there's consistency. These shelters, posters also came out of that early warning that families plan ahead, that they always have a go bag. So this would speak to what should you put in your go bag. A go bag is a bag that you have things that if you have 5 minutes alone, you grab it and everything that you need for at least 3 days is in there. And all of this speaks to early warning, that there is a level of preparedness, that there's a reduction in the loss of lives or property. Yes, and all of this has been funded through UNDP, through Preparedness, a Prepared Caribbean project, which has been implemented in 6 countries in the OECS.
I'm very happy to hear that these things are in place and that the Red Cross continues to educate and to inform and to, especially at the community level where it is very crucial. I rather suspect I'll have to bring you guys back on, not just by yourself, because I think you guys will need to have cooks on with me as well so that we could share some of that information in Creole. So I hope that both of your Creole is very strong and very good.
I will do my utmost.
So we need to do a part 2 to this conversation. So before we leave, we're quickly running out of time. Just some final words from both of you.
I think for me especially, I would really like to encourage our communities that the hurricane season, it may be a few weeks away, but the time to prepare for any emergencies now. And it's, even if you haven't done anything, speaking to your family, putting a family plan in place as to where do we go if, or who do we call if, is a step towards the right direction.
And I want to take it from the critical to the plan is what we are not adhering to. It is something one has spoken to for years. Please ensure that you have a 3-day supply of foodstuffs in your home. We saw COVID again, brought it to the fore when the country was shut down and people said suddenly everybody's cupboard was empty and they were crying foul. If they had followed this advice, they would have had it, and it wouldn't matter. To some of us, it really didn't matter. We could have possibly just go by the beach and catch a fish. But we have to be in that state. We have to try. Stop the panic buying. Don't tell me that, oh, I cannot afford. Brother, sister, in, let us say, February, your customer buying 2 pounds of sugar, try to buy 4. March, April, you know, and that which you bought in excess, you start to put in a little kit. You don't have to run on one day and spend your $300 one time, and then when the storm doesn't come, you blame everybody else. You organize your actions at home. And this is what I want people, this is what I want to leave people with. Organize yourself. Preparedness means all of those things.
Okay. Thank you very much for those wise words and for having an informative discussion with us here today at the Information Command Center. We've been speaking with Mr. Hubert Pierre, President of the Saint Lucia Red Cross, as well as Marvo Okele, and definitely I think we need to have them back on this show to discuss a lot more about Red Cross, preparedness, and what have you. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers for joining us. And as always, as the country begins to gradually open up, we ask that we take nothing for granted. Keep practicing the physical distancing, good personal hygiene, keep boosting your immune system, eat right and exercise, and continue to be your brother's keeper. Today I leave you with a message from one of our students as we take an end to the program here today.
Hello everybody, my name is Tristan Dorville. I am a Form 1 student of St. Mary's College and a national swimmer. I am sure we are all aware of COVID-19 and its effects on the world, and that St. Lucia is not exempt from those effects. So in order to protect every St. Lucian, the government has had to put in place some stringent measures, such as the partial curfew and the previous 7-day 24-hour curfew. I know it's not easy and that we all miss our friends and our routines, but I'm asking you not to lose hope, because these difficult times will pass. Now, as an active student athlete, I know that being inside can be boring and for some lonely. I miss going on the bus every morning and fraternizing with my friends. I also miss having lively conversations with my bus driver, Thomas. I also gravely miss going to the aquatic center for swim practice. And I know it can be hard to find a source of motivation every day, but I'm asking you to change your perspective and adopt an attitude of gratitude, because we have a lot to be grateful for. Athletes, please remember to exercise and stay active and meditate. I visualize my swims every day and look forward to my return to the pool and to competition. Students, we have been provided with the opportunity to continue our studies through e-learning. Everyone had to pull the rabbit out of the hat for this one, so please let's make it work. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Education, teachers, and everyone who worked hard within a short time frame to create the e-learning experience. At this time, it is extremely important to take care of ourselves, so that means eat good food, drink a lot of water, and get lots of sleep. And I can promise you, if we do all these things and we do it right, St. Lucia will come out of this pandemic a better and stronger nation. Thank you.